Story 1: How a shower curtain works. I kept finding the bathroom floor absolutely soaked after my roommate showered. I gently asked her to make sure the shower curtain was fully closed. Keeps happening. Finally, I figure out she's been drawing it closed with the bottom fully outside the tub. Okay, sigh. So, I draw her a diagram showing how if you put the bottom of the curtain inside the tub, then the water routes back into the tub rather than on the floor. She was like, "Oh, you and your science." Then the next time she comes out wrapped in a towel. Which way does the curtain go again? We were both graduate students in science PhD programs. Story 2. I was picking up Italian liras one time in 1999 before the euros from a bank in Tennessee. The teller brought me the envelope. When I opened it to count the money, she looked at me with total surprise and asked, "Do other countries have different money?" A bank teller. Story 3. My husband had to explain to a coworker that she couldn't take a train from the US to Europe. She insisted she had to because she didn't like flying. Story 4. I had to explain to my mom that my daughter was growing in my uterus and not my stomach, so the hot sauce on my burrito wasn't going to cause her skin burns. I also explained that if she were growing in my stomach acids would certainly cause way worse burns than hot sauce. It was then that I understood why the school nurse had to explain to me in 5th grade why I kept bleeding through my pants every month at school, and not my mom. Story 5. When I worked at a doctor's clinic, I had a lady on the phone wanting to book an appointment to have her flu shot. She specifically asked for it to be a telephone appointment. I could not believe that I had to explain to her that we cannot inject her through the phone. Story 6. That driving north meant the whole trip was uphill. I laughed at her until I realized she meant it, ended up laughing at myself because there's no way I was going to explain it to her. Story 7. A girl was staying with my family and had brought her dog. The dog got hurt at one point, a freak accident, that required surgery on a back leg and the cone of shame to be worn. At one point, she started cutting off a bit of the cone. Me, "Careful, cut too much, and he'll be able to reach his stitches." Her, "That's all right. He'll be able to keep them clean." I had to explain to her very slowly that the purpose of the cone was to keep him from licking the stitches and pulling them out. She honestly thought the cone was just an aesthetic thing. Story 8. Used to work at a daycare. One day, a little mouse entered the premises and caused an uproar until we caught and released it in the playground. After the whole ordeal, one of my colleagues, who was the least knowledgeable person I've ever met, said, "Let's hope it didn't lay eggs anywhere." I was too stunned to speak and just stared at her, while my room leader and friend said, in the most exasperated way, "Mice don't lay eggs," and walked off. Edit. I love how so many people in these replies are trying to find a different interpretation of what she must have meant, or say that she must have been joking. But no, unfortunately, I have to tell you she was completely of the opinion that mice lay eggs because she even insisted on it later. Story 9. Dogs are artificially bred, and there aren't wild golden retrievers, wild chihuahuas, and wild Maltese just running about that we're catching to make into pets. Story 10. I work in retail. I had just rang up a customer for a pair of shoes. The total came to $97.19. He gave me a $100 bill. I gave him his change and receipt. His wife comes in later to return them. I give her the $97.19. She goes, "No, my husband gave you a $100 bill. I want the 100 back." I said, "He did, but his total was only $97.19, so I gave him change back." She persists. She wants her $100 back. I said, "Ma'am, your husband only paid $97.19, so that is what you get back when you return the item." This woman, "He gave you $100. I want the $100 back." This wasn't some sort of quick change scam. This woman was just not making sense. I told her, "If you'd like to give me the $2.81 in change I gave him, I'd be happy to give you a $100 bill." She kept arguing with me for a minute, long enough for other people in line to speak up and tell her how mistaken she was. Eventually, she gave up and left with her $97.19. Story 11. I worked in tech support for an internet provider a few years back. A woman calls in, complaining her Wi-Fi isn't working. I go through the normal troubleshooting questions. What's your device? How are you connected? And finally, what can you see on your screen? Crazy woman, CW, it's black. Me, how do you mean? Are you getting errors? CW, the whole screen is black. Me, have you turned the laptop on? CW, I can't. Me, why not? CW, I've lost the charging cable. Me, okay. Do you have another device I can help you connect with? Maybe a tablet or your phone? CW, no, you need to get the laptop reconnected. Me, can you go and buy another charging cable? CW, no, you need to send me one. Me, we don't supply them. Also, we didn't supply you with your laptop, we just provide internet. CW, yes, and now you're not providing me internet, so you need to fix it. 40 minutes this went on, as my team around me stared in incoherent disbelief that this woman couldn't understand why her internet provider couldn't connect Wi-Fi to a computer with no power. I remember hanging up the phone and putting myself on break. My manager looked at me and told me to take a walk, while barely hiding her unrestrained giggles. Story 12. That no matter how much you might want to put a camouflage pattern on your walls, you, not the paint, have to determine what that pattern looks like. And you will also have to purchase multiple cans of paint tinted differently because camouflage doesn't come out of a can that way. Story 13. Birthdays. I work in information technology, and when we have new employees start, their default password is their birthday using the 2-digit month, day, and year format. I cannot tell you how many adults get confused about this. I often have to explain that January is 1, February is 2, etc. Just yesterday, I had a 40-something start counting on her fingers trying to figure out what October was before typing in the wrong password 3 times. I finally just had to do it for her. This was not an isolated incident. I would say it happens with at least a third of new employees, all adults. Story 14. That New Zealand, the country where we were both born, raised, and living, is not in Europe. To answer most of your questions, her reasoning is that when she fills out forms and has to tick a box for her ethnicity, she ticks New Zealand European. She thought that option was there because we are European and therefore in Europe. I had to explain to her that just means she is of European descent, that her ancestors lived in Europe. I also had to explain that not every New Zealander ticks that box. There are other ethnicities here too. Story 15. The difference between the number 0 and the letter O when giving them a temporary password so they could get back into their account. The only thing I could think of was, well, one is a letter and one is a number, and it still didn't click for them. Story 16. I volunteered in a charity shop. A lady came to the counter with a top and asked if I could look in the back for one of the same color but in a larger size. I tried to explain that we don't do that because we're a charity shop. She insisted that other shops like H&M have done that for her. She wouldn't take no for an answer. Eventually, I just went in the back for a few minutes, made a cup of tea for a coworker, and came out saying we didn't have any. She got mad at that too. Story 17. A Coinstar machine was located at the front of the store where I was working at a grocery store. As I was walking by, I noticed a woman struggling and asked if she needed help. She explained that she accidentally selected Spanish instead of English on the start screen. I began to walk her through the directions to use it. Feed your coins into the hopper, and it will count and sort them. At the end, take your receipt to customer service and get your cash. At this point, she was very annoyed with me and exclaimed, "But I don't want Spanish money." Sigh. Story 18. When you save a file on Windows, the save window actually lets you save the file into a particular folder. You don't have to go into your recent items to find it and then move it to where you want it to be saved. This person had been working an office job at a computer for more than 5 years at that point. Story 19. The text, refined for better comprehension and appropriateness, is as follows. It's essential to understand that the Aztecs and Incans are not interchangeable. They were in completely different parts of the Americas. Neither of them built the Nazca lines, but especially not the Aztecs, who were not in Peru. This person kept trying to tell me it was up to interpretation. Like, no, it's not. It's geography. Story 20. I work in travel. I've had to explain time zones more than you would believe. So, If you leave Sydney at 2 p.m. and fly for approximately 14 hours, crossing the international date line, you arrive in Los Angeles at noon, about 2 hours before you left. I've watched this mind-blown reaction happen in real time. Story 21. Her power was shut off because she didn't pay her electric bill for 3 straight months, and the letters on neon yellow paper from the power company were sent to warn her of this happening. She thought she was legally entitled to free electricity because it's a requirement for human survival. Edit to add, she wasn't in need. She worked at a very well-paying job and enjoyed shopping for expensive things. This was not one of those situations where she needed assistance or mercy. She needed a firm push, and the power company took action. Story 22. I had to explain to my 2 coworkers that it wasn't some magic fairy that was throwing away their coffee cups. They were joking around one day that their old coffee cups always disappeared by the next day, and I had to tell them it was me. I had to start doing it because they kept getting left in the way and being knocked over. I was off for a few days and came back, and there were cups everywhere. Story 23. That I could not steal a button from her Viber app. I work at the printing shop, and old people often come and give me their phone to send stuff on email or Viber or WhatsApp and print them. So one day, an old lady, around 70 years old, comes with her husband to print some documents. So I turn on the Wi-Fi, connect it, and send the PDF document on Viber. I printed it and said bye. The next day, she comes to my shop furious that I stole her direct photo send button on Viber. What happened? The app updated, and the button was moved to another place. I explained it, but she couldn't believe me. She's convinced I stole the button and wants me to give it back. She was arguing with me for approximately half an hour until her husband asked her to drop it. She never came back. Story 24. That raw meat juices, especially those of chicken, should in no way come in contact with other foods. I learned this in 8th grade home economics, so I was 13 years old. I had to explain to a 40-year-old that no, you can't put grilled chicken back on an unwashed cutting board that still has raw chicken juices. Story 25. An item damaged in a car crash did not qualify as a manufacturing defect covered under warranty. The store's refund policy was 90 days, and she had a receipt over a year old. Story 26. When I was in the military, we had a new airman whom I had to counsel on why it is important to shower, wear deodorant, and wash your clothes. We didn't work in the field or on the flight line where it may have been more acceptable to be stinky. We worked in the medical group in patient care, and patients were complaining about his foul odor. Backstory. Apparently, his mother took care of his laundry his whole life and would remind him to bathe. And since he was on his own now, he just hadn't really thought about it. Story 27. I work in a long-term stay hotel. We get a lot of military and work crews staying there. There have been quite a few men in their 50s and older that have come to ask me how to use the washing machines. They're not complicated or anything. There are like 4 options: cycle type, water temperature, soil level, load/water amount, a start button, and the spot to put the detergent. Usually, their excuse is their wife has always done it for them. I also had to talk with a manager once who was messing up payroll. When submitting people's times, if they worked for 7 hours and 30 minutes, 7:30, she'd input 7.3 hours rather than 7.5. Work 45 minutes of an hour? You guessed it, 0.45 instead of 0.75. I tried to explain it to her twice, but she couldn't get it, and I eventually had to reach out to the area manager to let him know what she was doing. Story 28. I had to explain to a restaurant worker that eggs are not dairy. Chickens do not have mammary glands. Someone who is allergic to dairy can eat eggs and chicken. Mayonnaise, containing eggs and oil, is therefore not dairy. She was looking at me like I was the stupid one the whole time. Story 29. 1. That the ticks on a male dog were actually nipples, and that male dogs have nipples just like every other mammal. 2. That a rabbit that clearly has visible testicles was a male. 3. That you cannot feed an animal that is strictly a carnivore, such as a ferret, a vegan diet. That animal was so sick when it came in. 4. That yes, when you have 2 animals of the same species of opposite genders in the house and they aren't spayed or neutered, they will breed. Even if they're mother and son, brother and sister, different ages, different sizes, different breeds, etc. You'd be shocked at how many people didn't think this would happen. Like, do you understand biology at all? Story 30. I hope this isn't too explicit for this subreddit. I had to explain to a grown adult who is college educated that no, anal sex does not cause AIDS. Also, if both parties are HIV negative, they cannot create AIDS by engaging in this activity. No, Daniel, that is not how viruses work. Story 31. I had to explain to someone that you cannot buy like 2 pounds of lunch meat and eat it for a month. The concept of things spoiling was new to him. To be fair, we were both college students and he was living alone for the first time. I used to work at a coffee shop and had to explain what filling something halfway meant to a woman I was training. She didn't understand the concept of half. Story 32. That bocconcini, parmesan, and feta are dairy cheeses. I used to work in a pizzeria and had to explain to this vegan couple on multiple occasions that these cheeses were all made from dairy. It got to the point where I had to grab the original containers and read the ingredients on the third try to get it to sink in. Story 33. I had to explain to 2 teenage girls, 15 and 16 years old, that the reason the candle went out was because they put the glass lid back on its jar. One of them said that fire can only be put out with water. I explained that fire needs oxygen and putting the lid back on it cut the supply. When they didn't understand after explaining a few times, I had to explain it to them like toddlers. Fire is hungry, so it eats the air. When all the air is gone, it goes to sleep. Bye-bye fire. The double O was too much. Yes, the look on their mom's face was so funny. She turned to me, threw her hands up and said, "I failed," in the most defeated tone. That poor woman. I would like to point out that we did, in fact, have a serious talk with these girls about proper fire safety and when to not use water on an open fire.